Welcome to Decision 2014, the Delegate to Congress debate. I'm your moderator, Daphne Harley. This program is brought to you through a partnership of WTJX and the Sigma Theta Omega chapter of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Before we begin, we do have a small audience here in the studio. We are asking everyone in the audience to not clap, sigh, or react in any way during the debate, except for right now, as we welcome the Delegate to Congress candidates, Ms. Stacey Plaskett, a Democrat, and Mr. Vince Dennett, a Republican. Candidates, you have 1 minute each to introduce yourself and your platforms. Ms. Plaskett, I will allow you to begin.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you to the listening and the viewing audience for being a part of this process and being concerned about the election that is coming up on November 4th. My name is Stacey Plaskett. I'm the Democratic candidate for the Delegate to Congress position. I am asking for your vote and for your support for the November 4th election because I believe and I understand what is necessary in these times that we are in. We are about to begin a new chapter in our Virgin Islands, and I know that I have the relevant experience, as well as the expertise and the drive and the creativity of mind to take us into that new chapter. I want to do that as your Democratic candidate going into the general election, and I'm asking for everyone to come out and support me, number one on the ballot on November 4th.
Thank you, Ms. Plaskett. Mr. Dennett, please introduce yourself.
Good evening, Virgin Islanders. I am Vince Dennett, Republican candidate for Delegate to Congress. I was born and raised on St. Thomas. I grew up, graduated from Eudorican High School, went to Georgia Tech in Atlanta, graduated from there and became a naval officer, where I served in the Navy as a pilot for many years. I left that profession and went into the private sector where I am today. What I've found is that in the 4 decades since I've come back home, I found that the power goes out, infrastructure is bad, and the problems really haven't changed in all that time. So as a private citizen, I decided to step up and say, it's time to get to work. It's time to change the way we view how we work with Washington, we work with the local government to get things happening. It's time to focus on the economy. It's time to focus on getting all of our people to be prosperous and contributing to the general fund. My name is Vince Dennett. I'm number 2 on the ballot, Republican candidate for Delegate to Congress.
Thank you. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer their question. All rebuttals will be limited to 1 minute. As the moderator, I have the option to follow up or extend any particular give and take. Candidates will wait to be acknowledged by me, the moderator, to answer a question or to do a rebuttal. Topics were submitted by the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. However, I formulated all the questions being asked tonight, and I am the only one who has seen them. No candidate will interrupt another candidate while speaking. Candidates may not ask a question of each other directly. At the end of the debate, each candidate can give their closing statements for up to 1 minute. So let us begin with the question. And the first question of the evening, and we will turn to Mr. Dennett first and then to Ms. Plaskett. Lacking a formal vote in Congress, your work in committees is critical to building alliances and support. What committees will you aspire to serve on that will yield the most benefit for the territory, and why?
Well, number one, like 2010, there'll be a wave election where the Republicans will maintain the House and take over the Senate. So as a freshman Republican, I'll have more flexibility committee-wise versus a freshman Democrat. So there are committees to go after agriculture. We need to go after education and the workforce. We need to go after energy and commerce. Those are the top 3 for me right now. And again, there are many other ones, and we will be able to form more solid and opportunistic opportunities for the Caribbean, for the Virgin Islands, to get us back on our feet. We need to go ahead and get the economy going. We need to focus on a blueprint for prosperity, a flat tax. We need to focus on the 6 avenues of revenue in St. Croix that are available that we're not doing anything about. And we need to take our St. Thomas tourism product to the next level. It's time for us to go after the private sector, set the table as a government, and then get out of the way and let the private sector fill the general fund. As a Republican, I will be able to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Plaskett, a
Is it
rebuttal?
the same question or rebuttal?
This is the same question unless you have a rebuttal to his response.
I can respond just on my own without
Thank
the
you.
rebuttal. Thank you. When you talk about committee assignments, unlike what Mr. Dennett says, having worked in Congress, I understand that both Democrats and Republicans sit on each of the committees. So there's not an instance in which one side gets a committee assignment and another doesn't. While the Republicans may or may not be in Congress, the majority, both sides will in fact have committee assignments. I've spoken already with the House leadership of the Democratic Party and asked them, should I be elected, to be given the committee assignment of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, which will deal with our roads, as well as the infrastructure in terms of hospitals and schools, our inter-island travel. I've also asked to sit on the Committee on Agriculture. Most members of Congress sit on 2 committees, and if I'm not successful on one of those, I've also asked for the Committee on Homeland Security, which as well will deal with our ports as well as our airports, and also in Foreign Affairs, in which I have the background having an undergraduate degree from Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service, so that I can articulate the needs not just of the Virgin Islands, but of the entire Caribbean basin. And although it may appear that the Republicans will in fact be in the majority in Congress, this will still be a Democratic administration. And all of the funding that goes into the Virgin Islands from the federal government will come from a Democratic administration. And for that reason, having a Democrat in Congress to be able to speak with and deal with the administration will be most beneficial to the territory of the Virgin Islands at this time.
Mr. Dennett?
Yes, always remember that the House controls the purse strings, and the purse strings are controlled by the Republicans. Now, experience and connections in government is one thing, but experience and connections in government is what got us to where we are right now as a territory. Now, I've roamed the halls of Washington also as a naval officer. As a naval officer, I was assigned to go ahead and take care of business with senators and congressmen concerning concerns that constituents had with members of the military. You had to go up there, you had to get the problem solved satisfactorily with any senator or any congressman, and then get back to the constituent. So being in Washington and roaming the halls of Washington is not foreign to anything I've done.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next question. I'll ask Ms. Plaskett to respond first. The Expiring Provisions Improvement, Reform, and Efficiency Act of 2014, known as the Expire Act, extends the $13.25 Virgin Islands rum cover-over rate. Since Congress must approve the final $2.75 every 2 years, what specific action will you take to help to avoid the financial uncertainty of this fund?
I think that's an excellent question, and one that is already a part of my 7-point plan. One of the things that I think that we have allowed ourselves to go into is a precarious situation in which many of the programs that make up most of our general fund are in fact things that we need to go to Congress for on an every year or sometimes every 2-year basis. We have an EDC program that in 2008 was decimated with the jobs, not only in 2004 with the Jobs Act, but in 2008 with the Great Recession, which caused our EDC program to lose almost $200 million in terms of our general fund, the taxes that were coming in to the territory because of that. And the rum cover-over is another issue. I would fight for a permanency within the rum cover-over so that we are not looking at extenders every year to determine whether or not we are going to have that money to satisfy the bonds that are already obligated to that money, as well as to the future growth of our territory, to which we are looking for the rum cover-over for that. I also would look very much into trying to find additional funding and in terms of our Veterans Affairs. There are so many areas in which we are in a precarious situation. Our Veterans Affairs, our veterans do not have security in terms of the federal government and what's being offered to them. Our voting rights as well are something that we need to fight much more aggressively and be vigilant in determining that we not only have a vote on the floor, but a vote in for our President of the United States, as well as not only the rum cover-over, looking at the gasoline excise tax, which the Supreme Court said had to be determined by Congress. things that are not necessarily convenient are no reason for me as your delegate to go after them, and I intend to do so if elected as the next delegate to Congress.
Mr. Dennett?
Let's get real. We have to go after and maintain a relationship to keep these programs going. We can't lapse at any time. But at the same time, we need to recognize where this territory gets its money from. From the private sector, the lion's share. From the federal government, roughly 18 to 20%. And from borrowing. So we need to go ahead and come up with an economic plan that nurtures the private sector. So if we fall short on getting programs like the run, cover, and over taken care of, we go ahead and we are able to take care of our own general fund via turning the private sector loose. Okay, that's what we got. We have to set up the private sector to make things go. We can't sit down and do things like, for instance, oppose private sector programs here, like the whole Malone Act. We had problems with the Malone Amendment, and that was a private industry stifling measure. So it's time to cut the private sector loose and at the same time stay on the programs in the federal government to keep the monies flowing our way.
Okay, so let me be sure I understood your response then, Mr. Dennett. What would you be willing to do to help to avoid the financial uncertainty of this fund because we have to go to Congress every 2 years?
We have to go ahead and we have to take our economy to the next level so that if we don't get that money, that we are comfortable in the fact that we have a strong economy that can fill the general fund where we don't have to worry about it if we make those errors.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I repeatedly have heard my opponent discuss the fact that we only have 18% of federal funding from the government and that we need not go to the federal government for additional funding. We as the Virgin Islands have much less federal funds coming into this territory than other sectors. You have places like, this is by far the lowest. The lowest state that is receiving federal funds is one that's receiving 20%. And there are states that are receiving as much as 43% of the revenues coming into their territory, into their jurisdictions from the federal government. I am very in favor of increasing public-private partnerships to increase the growth of our private sector, using things such as new market tax credits, federal incentives to bring tax credits, as well as funding to grow our infrastructure as well as businesses. But I do understand that we need to be receiving from the federal government our fair share of what needs to be coming into this territory at this time.
One final rebuttal.
Nothing wrong with getting our fair share, but we need to remember the federal government is borrowing 40 cents of every dollar that it takes in. And it's printing money, which is all not good. It's not sustainable. So what do we do as a territory if that funding source dries up? We need to sit down and come up with our own way of generating money by bringing corporations here, bringing companies here to generate taxpayers, to generate entrepreneurs. We cannot just rely, we'll go after the money we need to go after from the feds as long as it's there, but we need to know that the policies that are in place right now are uncertain, and we need to plan for that.
Okay, thank you. I think we've exhausted that subject. Moving on then to Mr. Dennett first and then Ms. Plaskett. Since our islands have limited resources, what should be done about the immigration and border protection issues which are out of the control of the territorial government?
We're in a unique position as a territory. Outside the customs circle, for customs purposes, we are considered foreign. For immigration purposes, we're considered domestic. We can use that unique status to take advantage of what's called inversion. We just had Burger King leave the U.S. because the U.S. has the highest corporate tax rate. We can go ahead, and it's been called companies leaving the country because it's economically unpatriotic. It'll be economically patriotic if these companies come to the Virgin Islands, set up shop here, where we're considered foreign. We would give them favorable tax rates, and at the same time, they're still domestic, so they can't be considered unpatriotic. It's time for us to build an economic base here to generate prosperity, and we need to set it up and let government get out of the way and let these people fill the general fund with taxpayers. Right now, we are strangling St. Croix, we're strangling St. Thomas with issues like the LEAC, with other sorts of issues that are just generating bad economic decisions for everybody.
Okay. So just to be clear, your response is that that we should attract private enterprise to provide the resources that are necessary for immigration and custom border protection issues?
We need to attract them here because prosperity generates security. And then now we all have the problem of U.S. Customs and Border Patrol saying they don't have the resources to handle their problem, which is their number one concern right now. They don't have the resources, manpower, personnel. If we have a strong economy, we will have enough of a general fund to fund that and to also allow the federal government to assist us with solving all of these problems. Again, the government is not the end-all, be-all answer. We need to cultivate the private industry to make ourselves economically strong so we have better status when we go ask for help in the Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Danette. Ms. Plaskett, I'll pose that same question to you.
Yes. I don't think that growing our economy is the reason that we don't have sufficient customs and border protection here in the Virgin Islands. I think it's that we need to be more aggressive in allowing Washington to see the importance of immigration here in this territory. So I would be in favor of ensuring that we are receiving the proper coastal zones in terms of our the Coast Guard patrolling our borders, and not just in terms of immigration, but particularly in terms of crime, because of drug trafficking and gun trafficking that goes on here in the territory. Additionally, I would be in favor of relaxation in terms of our visas between the Eastern Caribbean and the Virgin Islands, for medical visas, for short tourist visas, as well as for student visas. That also can grow our economy here in the territory if there was a relaxation, which is possible at the Senate, in the Senate as well as in the House of Representatives, to ensure that the laws allow that. So those are the things that I would be working on.
Thank you.
Well, right now we have a problem with the C1D visas that are a main focus here for Customs and Border Protection. All of the commerce that comes to us are from employees that have C1D visas. But right now we've been asleep at the wheel, and those visas are expired, and all of that commerce has to go foreign before it comes back to us, and it's going to increase costs. You think the LEAC was a problem? Go ask your local border and CBP officer about what is happening with visas in the territory.
Thank you. Final rebuttal?
Again, you know, the discussion that is being had here is really an apples and orange ones, because my opponent is talking about an economy, and I'm talking specifically about people. Allowing people to be able to come in and out of the territory, I think, is very important, and to making sure that there's a safety within the territory in terms of our Coast Guard, our patrolling our borders, and ensuring that our youth have safety in terms of guns and the drugs that are coming in through our territory.
Thank you. So, Ms. Plaskett, you will respond first this time, and this is a two-part question. Most candidates shy away from their predecessor. As a freshman delegate and a candidate who previously challenged the current delegate, will you confer with the current delegate to leverage your personal and professional relationship in Congress? That's part one. And part two, what has your predecessor not done that you think should have been done and that you will do once in office?
Those are great questions. You know, I think that it's important that we present new ideas and present different opinions on issues, and that to me does not mean that individuals do not have great personal wealth and can afford us with a great deal of experience. I have reached out to the present delegate, and as the Democratic candidate, we've been working together in a Democratic campaign here into the general election. Most recently, 2 weeks ago, I was her guest in Washington, where she introduced me to members of various caucuses, and we discussed a lot of the issues that she's working on. We had that discussion even before the primary, in which I visited her in her office and had discussions with her about the issues that she was working on there, and which she felt would become an issue again in the 114th Congress come January 2015. I think it's important that we reach out to everyone that's possible. On day one, January, after the swearing in of our governor, I intend to sit down, if elected as delegate, with the new governor to discuss with them the challenges that we have here in the territory. And I've made a pledge that I will meet quarterly with our local Senate and discuss with them the issues and the things that I'm working on in Washington and how we can facilitate growth and take the territory into the next level. And the second part of your question, the things that might be done differently. We come from different backgrounds. I have a degree from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, and I'm a lawyer by trade. I've been practicing law for 20 years. I've worked in Congress, not just roaming the halls of Congress, but as a staffer, as a lobbyist, and as counsel on a committee in Congress. And the things that I have seen there would afford me a very different viewpoint and perspective. I want to be one of the chief lobbyists in Washington, working with as the Virgin Islands' special interest groups, and I'd like to work on increasing the federal poverty level, adjusting that to meet our cost of living, as well as the DC school access law, and many other things that are in my 7-point plan.
Thank you. Mr. Dennett, would you like me to repeat the question, or are you okay?
No. You're talking about the predecessor, or are we talking about what has not been done?
That was a two-part question.
Correct. All right. As far as a Republican being in Congress, I will have to make new associations with the leadership that's in place there to be an advocate for the United States Virgin Islands. Also, there's no problems with conferring with former delegates to find out what their perspectives are, because you need every resource possible to move forward. You take the good and you move forward. Again, I have a military background and a private sector background where failing is really not an option. Making excuses is really not an option. You have to go out there and get it done and move on. So we'll be able to do that in Washington, D.C. Again, we need to come up with a blueprint for prosperity, working with the governor, working with the legislature as a team to take the economy forward, to take the Virgin Islands people forward. This is about the people. This is about service, not about self. It's time to move forward. As far as things that are not getting done, where do you start? For instance, again, we have a whole bunch of areas in St. Croix, areas of economic opportunity that are not being taken advantage of for years. At least six of them. You're talking about the ports. You're talking about agriculture. You're talking about the two underwater tracking ranges in St. Croix. You're talking about the broadband net, the airport. There's a myriad of all of them out there that needs to be taken care of that can bring economic prosperity to the territory. We need to go after them. We need to take the St. Thomas product to the next level, the tourism product to the next level. And again, we can do that with the Republican relationships we can make in a Republican-controlled Congress.
One rebuttal?
Yes. Discussing just meeting with only Republicans, I think, would not serve the Virgin Islands well. And in terms of talking with members of the Democratic Party in Congress right now, one of the things that many of the freshmen have been working on is a caucus that's called the Unified for Solutions Caucus. These are Democrats and Republican freshmen from the last two classes that have determined that the way that things need to get done in Washington is to speak to individuals across the aisle. I think as your next delegate to Congress, while I will be caucusing and working with the Democrats as a Democrat and following the Democratic mandate in Congress, I have no problems as well speaking with those individuals, any individual that is willing and able to assist the Virgin Islands.
Thank you. Mr. Dennett.
Just because I'm a Republican doesn't mean I'm not willing to caucus with people, not caucus, but work with people on the other side. If you have a good idea, be you a Republican, a Libertarian, an Independent, a Democrat, it doesn't matter. We're going to have to work for solutions, and that's what it's all about. It's all about solving problems, not just going up there and name dropping. That's not what it's all about. It's about solving problems for the people. It's about service, not about self.
Okay, thank you. The next question posed at Mr. Dennett first and then Ms. Plaskett. Veterans here in the territory often complain that they are not getting their full benefits. What do you intend to do to address this issue?
I'm a veteran, and I could attest to that. And what would I do? A lot of the veterans right now are leaving the territory. They work here, they have an entire career here, and then they pack up and they leave so they can be close to veterans hospitals, veterans bases, where the prices are closer to what they can deal with as a retiree. So all these issues need to be brought to the fore, not just issues of getting a loan, not just, and getting a loan is a process in itself. I've gone through that whole process. Again, as a veteran, I'm sensitive to all of these problems, and we have to go after it. Go after the Department of the Navy, go after the Veterans Affairs, go after the U.S. Air Force, go after the United States Marine Corps and the Coast Guard. Go after all the services the Veterans Affairs, the Congress, the committees that control those funds, and work for, because as per capita, the territories provide a lot of service people that go out there and serve the country. I'm one of them, and I am sensitive to those issues and will work definitely to try to solve them.
Thank you. Ms. Plaskett.
Yes, throughout my campaign, I've made it a point to speak specifically with our veterans because I understand that many of the issues that the veterans have are directly related to the delegate to Congress position and what the delegate can do and should be doing for our veterans that are here living in the territory. I have met with the American Legion's groups and talked with them about their issues, and I understand it very, very well. Just recently, there was a bill passed in Congress that's called McCain-Saunders that deals with veterans, specifically their health care issues. And in one of the provisions in that is a provision that would very much help the Virgin Islands that I intend to ensure moves forward. And that is that if a veteran lives more than 40 miles from the nearest veterans hospital, they can use a local facility for use, and that facility would receive the reimbursement or receive payment by Veterans Affairs. I intend to ensure that our veterans are able to take use of that. I've also been working with We the People Project, which is a group from many of the territories that are fighting for rights, not only for voting, but also for our veterans as well, because we are being put out under the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution just because individuals intend to live here. In the last conflict in the Middle East, Virgin Islanders suffered casualties and fought in that 300% more than other areas. We have been in every conflict in the United States, and we need to be treated fairly and equally by our federal government. I intend to ensure and to fight for those rights and be constantly in conversation with our veterans to ensure that they are receiving that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Next question then. Ms. Plaskett, you will respond first. The mail. The mail processing through Puerto Rico continues to be of concern to our residents. Do you intend to address this issue, and if so, what will you do?
My understanding, after having done research with regard to our mail, is that the mail was in fact sorted through Puerto Rico, basically because Puerto Rico leveraged the use of the Virgin Islands to receive more mail pieces and more mail volume in Puerto Rico so that they could have additional workers there under union laws. We have got to push back on that because our facility meets the mandate that's necessary. And there's no sure that not only individuals and private citizens, but specifically also businesses are jeopardized by mail that has to go first through Puerto Rico and is oftentimes lost. It's untimely. There's spoilage that occurs here when it gets to the territory. So I think it's imperative for us to look at that. There's also the issue that many people talk about, not just with the U.S. Postal Service, but also in terms of the international status that many of our mail has. We are about to enter 2017, which will be the 100 years in which we are part of the United States. And under that original treaty, we were kept out of the customs zone, which in fact makes many of the things that come back and forth international. That is something during the time that, if elected, I'm in Congress, we need to begin to rethink and determine if it meets the needs of where we are now in the 21st century. It is my intention to be vigilant about that and see what is best for the entire territory, being very sensitive to those of our merchants and those of our businesses that utilize that customs duty to their benefit as well.
Thank you. Mr. Dennett.
This is the perfect example of taking a federal bureaucracy and having the private sector take a lot of the issues there and solve it for us in a public-private partnership. There's already the United States Postal Service is working with UPS and FedEx and DHL and other carriers to make the cargo and to make the mail move, make the packages, the mail, the cargo move. And what we need to do is we need to go ahead and forge that relationship, because right now the Postal Service is under a big financial burden right now, and they're trying to figure out how to solve it. And the way to solve it is to use the private sector. The private sector, again, already is working with UPS and the United States Postal Service together to make mail move. The Puerto Rico issue, using these entities, FedEx, UPS, DHL, and the like, we bypass Puerto Rico and come straight here when it comes southbound. And when you go talk about local mail, we just need to go ahead and find the solutions here, again, working with those private entities to make the cargo move, because private sector is about efficiency. Government is not about efficiency, and we are experiencing that right now. A lack of efficiency because it's pure government.
Okay, thank you. Rebuttal?
Yes. While I understand that we can use the private sector for many places, use of DHL, FedEx, and the Federal Express and others, DHL and UPS, are not the solution to the problems that individuals have with the United States Postal Service. It is a service that is available to Virgin Islanders and should be done in the best interest of Virgin Islanders and done fairly and efficiently. The cost of moving pieces of mail between the cost of a DHL or a cost of the Federal Express is in no comparison to what it costs when you're using it by the United States Postal Service. And we need to ensure, if there is a federal service that's available, that it's being done fairly and it's equitable to the people of the Virgin Islands.
Mr.
Again,
Delegate.
the private sector is about efficiency. Government is about bureaucracy. And the private sector can reduce costs if we sit down and partner with them and let them come up with the solutions. Issues with unions, issues with all these, they have a handle on it, and we have to go after that. Again, the service is there, the service is available to us. Let's avail ourselves of it, and let's avail ourselves of the efficiency that's out there. Let's not rule it out because it's not the U.S. Postal Service.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. The next question. I pose that first to Mr. Dennett and then Ms. Plaskett. Outline for us the strategy that you will use for getting additional federal dollars into the territory.
Right now, we already have a method of getting federal dollars into the territory. The monies come to the various states, various territories already. Again, you have to go ahead and forge relationships, and again, in a Republican Congress, it'll be much easier to do that with a Republican at the helm here as a delegate. Also, we need to show that we have the ability to show economic strength. So again, I propose working with the legislature and the executive for a Virgin Islands flat tax that will help bring corporations down to the territory. Again, Initiative St. Croix, which that'll exploit all of the avenues of revenue that are on St. Croix. St. Croix holds a key to our economic future. And again, Concept St. Thomas, which takes the St. Thomas tourism product to the next level. We need to be an economy, not just bringing federal dollars here, advocating for federal dollars here. Again, the federal government is borrowing 40 cents of every dollar it spends. So we need to not only go after what's available from them while it lasts, but we need to establish ourselves in case that federal line of credit, that federal line of dollars dries up. Again, we need to establish, we need to go ahead and focus on our economy here.
Ms. Plaskett, your response?
Yes. I think that there are several ways that we can look at receiving additional federal dollars here. I've talked about the adjustment in the federal poverty level. The Virgin Islands has one of the highest cost of livings. Jurisdictions like Alaska, Hawaii, parts of New York have gone to the federal government and said, because our cost of living is so high in these jurisdictions, the national level of federal poverty is not applicable to our jurisdiction. And they've been able to have adjustments which bring additional dollars in for school lunches, food stamps, other programs that are available for individuals to bring themselves out of poverty and live a better life and have a second chance. Additionally, one of the things that I believe in is public-private partnerships, and there's federal funding and assistance available in Washington that we have not yet tapped into that will assist in the growth of developing industry here in the territory. Treasury Department through new market tax credits, through the CDFI program, bank enterprise loans and bank enterprise tax credits are monies that they're sitting in Washington. The Virgin Islands would be put at the top of the list because of our rural designation, because of our demographics that we have not yet applied for. These are monies that are not going away, even with the borrowing that is going on in Washington, because they are monies that have been allocated and which are available to many jurisdictions, have been taking use of them so that private sector can grow. so that the private sector can then take the place of the federal government in terms of federal funding. Those are two areas in which I'd like to work. Additionally, because every federal dollar that comes into the territory goes through the delegate's office, I believe that it would be the delegate's responsibility to ensure that that money is used properly and to make sure that no dollar goes back to Washington. And so in my office, if elected as delegate, I would ensure that I had relationships with our local agencies to ensure that they're meeting the technical requirements, the compliance requirements that are necessary through necessarily phone calls in Washington to make sure that we're making the best use of those dollars so that they are going to the benefit of the people of the territory.
Mr. Dennett.
It's interesting that you mentioned the poverty level. We need to go ahead and develop people to become entrepreneurs. We want people to have jobs and careers where they can get bonuses, they can get pay raises, not go out there and expect a handout because we've raised the poverty level by some percentage. No, we need to go out there, again, establish ourselves, not be hat in hand. We need to go out there and establish ourselves as productive people. Virgin Islanders, we want to work for what we earn. That's what we do. We don't sit down there and expect handouts from anybody. That's what we do. Now, we'll go after the federal dollars, but again, the federal dollars, the way the federal government is going on right now, may not be there for us, and we need to establish a way to bring private monies into the territory so that the entire economy benefits, not just some poverty level number.
Okay, thank you.
I have
Rebuttal?
a rebuttal. Yes. First, those monies are monies that are available to all individuals. And I think that the Virgin Islands needs to get its fair share. We're not asking for handouts. And I personally take offense at the notion that because we're receiving assistance in terms of school lunch programs, in terms of food stamps, that people who receive those are receiving handouts. When I worked in law school, I worked a full-time job during the day. I went to law school at night. Well, I had 3 children when I graduated under the age of 5. And I received assistance from the federal government, and I didn't see it as a handout. I saw it as an assistance to me while I needed it so that I could go to the next level. And I think that's what Virgin Islanders are looking for, and that's why we're asking for those monies, so that we can use that time period in which the gap that many families are facing, that they can then put themselves on their feet and move on to become self-sustaining members of this community.
Final rebuttal, yes.
Well, that's interesting because I went through college. I didn't have any handouts. I worked hard. I groomed my son to be the same way. It's not about just because you had a crutch because you went through some kind of poverty program doesn't make you more righteous than anybody else. There are many people out there that worked, that got it done, that did it without any federal assistance. We want to groom that. We want to instill that in our children. We don't want to say, hey, look, you can be average and then go after some federal dollars. You need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, and we need to develop that. We have a society right now that needs that nurturing, that needs that strong hand, and it's time for us to grow and stand on our own 2 feet and not have our hands out for federal money.
Final rebuttal on this subject, and then we have to move on.
Again, I guess you didn't hear me when I said that I worked a full-time job and went to school at night. And so I was not looking for a crutch. I was availing myself of monies that were available from the federal government, which I think many families are looking for. People never want a handout, and I don't believe that Virgin Islanders are looking for a crutch when these monies are out there for them. I think that they're made available so that families can move to the next level, and that's what families are doing. And I don't think that any family, anyone wants to be a beggar or wants to receive something for nothing. And that's why these programs have been put in place so that people can use them and move on to become self-sustaining.
Okay, I think we've exhausted that topic. Let's move on to the next one. Mr. Dennett, I think you kind of touched on this earlier in one of your responses. I believe that it is your turn, Ms. Plaskett,
Sure.
to respond first. In the Virgin Islands, we have a mirror tax system.
Mm-hmm.
Reforming the federal income tax system has become an issue. Many options have surfaced on the federal level, including the flat tax and consumption taxes and income taxes that encourage people to save rather than spend. In light of the budget deficits that are stretching far into the future, what are your specific recommendations on tax reform?
Well, the Virgin Islands is in a very interesting position because we have a mirror tax code, and because we don't have a state tax. Individuals who live in the Virgin Islands fill out the federal forms, and rather than those monies go to Washington, they stay here in the territory. Because of that, and because we have the mirror code, we're able to have programs which give tax incentives at the federal level, which are used to incentivize companies to come here and grow their businesses. Additionally, we cannot, in fact, use the flat tax because we have a mirror code right now. There are 7 states which have a flat tax. Those are state taxes. Those are not federal taxes. The Virgin Islands is only a federal tax. And presently, because of the economic situation we're in, I don't think that a flat tax is viable. If you look at the flat tax, individuals who make $35,000 or less end up paying double the amount of taxes in the flat tax. And individuals who make $200,000 or more have a reduction of at least half of those taxes. Those monies that are coming from those individuals that are making $200,000 or more on their income taxes are monies that our general fund needs now. Down the road, this may be something that we could look at. It's a very interesting discussion and a great policy discussion, but it's not something that is relevant to the Virgin Islands and its tax system now, and not relevant in terms of what the general fund needs to sustain itself when we have the amount of budget deficit. One of the things that I want to look at is how do we increase the reliability of the programs that we have now to incentivize more companies to come down. Recently, our local legislature has passed laws related to captive insurance, bringing many of those industries down. We've used tax increment financing to create much larger infrastructure here in the territory. Those are areas that I think that we need to boost and to encourage so that we can have individuals. One of the things that I would be in favor of that would not be within my purview as a delegate to Congress, but our local Senate, is to reduce the gross receipts that our local businesses have so that more money can circulate within the territory.
Thank you.
Well, I
Mr.
fully
Dennett.
understand that very democratic answer by my opponent, because the flat tax is out there and it's very, very doable. Every time it's been tried, it's been wildly successful. Again, if you make $10 billion and you pay 15% tax, you pay a huge amount of money into the government. If you make $1,000, you pay the same percentage. There's nothing more fair than that. The problem is that we have a system where politicians benefit from redistributing income. And what we need to do is understand that the federal tax code that we mirror is 70,000 plus pages. That's 10 times the size of the Bible with no good news in it. Again, the flat tax would be a basis for 15% is what I propose on VinceDannett.com. 15% individual, 20% business, as a way to take advantage of inversion, the inversion phenomenon where corporations are leaving, big companies are leaving the United States and going to places like Ireland, 12.5% tax, going to places like Canada, 25% tax. If we have a 20% tax, they will make their own decision and move here and bring their resources and their jobs and their careers to these shores. The Revised Organic Act can be modified to make this work. This is a partnership between the delegate at the federal level and the legislature and the governor to make this happen, to make all of us move forward. It is fair, it is doable, and it will work.
Okay. Rebuttal?
Yes, I do not believe that it's doable in the Virgin Islands right now. The places that it's been wildly successful, as my opponent says, which I'm not entirely sure of, if you ask those individuals who are in the middle class in those jurisdictions, are related to state taxes, which are not applicable here in the Virgin Islands because those places still have the federal tax, which does not have a flat tax. And so the jurisdictions that have the flat tax, it's only related to the state tax and not the federal tax. In the Virgin Islands, we are using the federal tax for our mirror code.
Again, this is a chance for the United States Virgin Islands as a territory to lead the entire nation by revising what's a draconian tax code. We can do it here with our unique status. And saying that it can't be done is not an answer. I don't believe in it can't be done. I believe it can be done to raise all of us to better economic prosperity.
Thank you. All right. And our next question, I believe we'll turn to Mr. Dennett first. Our children are our future, and yet funding for youth programs has diminished. Funding for enrichment programs in schools has also declined. Do you see this as a priority, and what would you do to help?
It's a priority in that we need to, I used to work in the private sector. I went ahead and I had programs where we would bring students into the company to work in the various areas and provide scholarships. What's going on now with the high cost of energy, with the higher taxes that we have to endure, these programs are drying up from the private sector simply because they're trying to survive. These programs are necessary. There are federal dollars for them, but again, we need to encourage the private sector so that they can come up with programs where they bring these students like we used to do. We used to partner with CAHS. We used to partner with University of the Virgin Islands and have a management training system where they learned about maintenance, they learned about customer service, they learned about sales, and they developed a sense of can-do attitude, as opposed to what we have right now, which is a culture of dependency. Ladies and gentlemen, again, it's all economic. We need to focus on getting the economy going, getting companies coming here, getting companies willing to go back into the economy and helping the students and helping our future.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Plaskett, the Virgin Islands does not receive SSI. Medicare is said to be going broke. What can be done to fix Medicare and to ensure that Virgin Islanders receive SSI?
One of the things that I recognized when I spoke with the present delegate is that presently there is no such thing as a territorial caucus. All of the territories work individually, and when there are crises or issues, they band together and then fight for those things as a group. One of the things as a freshman that I would be proposing is creating a territories caucus, because it's my belief that if we are working together, we can accomplish more. All of the territories have the issues related to SSI as well as Medicare in some form or fashion, and it would be incumbent on all of us within the territories to work together to ensure that the cap that is on Medicare be removed so that we receive the same treatment as the rest of the United States on the mainland. Again, we are not asking for handouts from the federal government. We are asking for the same treatment that all of other Americans are receiving when they are living in the mainland. Deciding to live that you want to live in the Virgin Islands should not be a detriment to a family or to an individual, particularly those who are in need of Medicare and SSI. And I would be fighting to ensure that those things are brought to the territory so that they can be utilized to those who need it most.
Okay. Mr. Danette.
Well, we've been fighting for SSI since 1997 and failed. We need to go after it, and we need to stay after it so that, again, the Virgin Islands, just because you're territorially linked here, all these benefits come to you if you go back to the States, but once you are here, they go away. We need to get rid of that restriction. The other thing we need to do is Medicare has been gutted by $710 billion. That's we're already in a hole after Medicare. So that program is purely a Democrat redistribution of monies in the healthcare system. Again, $710 billion. We need to work to get that back into Medicare because, it's against our kids, it's against our elderly.
Any rebuttal? No? Okay. Well, without a rebuttal, I just ask just very briefly for you to tell us, well, you've talked about a lot of priorities, and what would be your top 2 priorities if you were elected? Ms. Plaskett. Very briefly.
The top 2 priorities that I have and the legacy that I would want to leave in Washington is one of bringing economic growth to the territory of in the Virgin Islands in terms of job creation, growing our jobs and growing our economy, as well as to do something about our energy. I've sat down with many individuals within many portions of our energy sector here in the territory. And if we do not deal with our energy crisis, we will not grow jobs and not grow our economy. So those are 2 areas that I would very much like to work on. But just very briefly, one of the things that I wanted to bring up that would not be the top 2 priorities is our education. I think that education is so important to our young people, providing them with additional after-school, summer programs for our young people. Earlier this evening, I met with a young man who's starting up a Democratic club, a Young Democrats Club at UVI. And I just want you to know, Mr. Brown, that I heard you. I heard you as a young man who said that one of your main things that you would be advocating for is youth safety. And one of the ways that we can make our young people safe is by increasing their educational opportunities, as well as increasing the amount of after-school, summer programs, and extracurricular activities in our schools.
Okay, thank you. Again, very briefly, top 2 priorities.
Top 2 priorities would be economy and corruption. Again, the economy, we have the blueprint for prosperity that I've outlined with the VI flat tax, the initiative St. Croix, and the concept St. Thomas. Now, as a delegate to Congress, every local entity that takes federal dollars, you can go ahead and put some teeth into the Inspector General and have all of those areas audited to make sure, because it's not just the income side of the balance sheet, it's also the expense side of the balance sheet. Are all of our monies being properly spent? And then when those deficiencies are identified, you go to the Department of Justice and you have the U.S. Attorney follow up and take care of those priorities. Being a public servant is a big responsibility, and the people need to understand and have faith that you are taking care of the public trust. So the economy and stamping out corruption actively.
I want to thank you, candidates. That was the last question for the evening. Now we will ask the candidates to give their closing remarks. There will be no rebuttals on closing remarks. Each of you will have 1 minute. And Mr. Dennett, your closing statement first. Then Mrs. Plaskett.
Well, greetings again, Virgin Islanders. I'm Vince Dennett, your Republican candidate for delegate to Congress. What we need is action, not more of the same. We need to change the philosophy of the delegate that we sent to Washington so we can get our economy going, so we can get our people to be prosperous and independent. That is the goal. That is the mission. We also want to focus again on service, not about self-service. We want to also make sure we understand that the private sector is where the money is at, and we need to nurture the private sector to nurture the general fund, taxpayers, and opportunities. I'm Vince Dennett. I'm number 2 on the ballot, and I'm looking for your vote. Thank you for having me.
Ms. Plaskett? Your
Yes.
closing statement.
I'd love to this time I want to thank WTJX as well as the sorority of Alpha Kappa Alpha for having this forum, this debate for us here in the Virgin Islands. My name is Stacy Plaskett. I am number 1 on the ballot and the Democratic candidate for the delegate to Congress position. I'm asking all Virgin Islanders for your support as well as for your vote on November 4th. I believe that I have the relevant experience for where we are right now with an expertise not only in law, not having only worked in Washington, but also having been in economic development to take the Virgin Islands to where we need to go in this next chapter as we come to in January of 2015. One of the things that I have tried to stay true to throughout my campaign is this is about people and not about politics. I see myself as a public servant who is seeking elected office, not as a politician. I'm a Virgin Islander who came home because I care about this territory, and I am asking to go to Washington to be your representative and your delegate to Congress because I want to help our Virgin Islanders move to where we need to be, where I know and believe we can go in this coming year. Thank you so much, and please go out and vote.
We would like to thank our delegate to Congress candidates for participating in this debate. We also want to thank our studio audience and our viewers at home for joining us tonight. The Decision 2014 Delegate to Congress debate was brought to you through a partnership of WTJX and the Sigma Theta Omega chapter of the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Please join us on Tuesday, October the 14th, 2014 for the Lieutenant Governor debate, followed by the gubernatorial debate. Don't forget to vote on November the 4th. I'm Daphne Harley, and good night.